Hi there, Christian Henson from Spitfire Audio here. The end of last year, Paul and I appeared on stage at the Barbican announcing one of the most exciting kind of moments of our lives. And we ended that presentation with, "This is just the beginning." Unfortunately, we can't be at the Barbican today for obvious reasons. So Paul and I thought it'd be quite fun to do basically a sidebar on our channels. We'll do part one here, and then straight after this part, Paul will take over on his channel. We want to explain to you what's going on with BBCSO. And if you haven't seen this video, well, just have a quick look. Right, Paul, before we dive into Discover, it's well worth mentioning it's not just one thing that we've released today, it's actually two. There are now 3 tiers of BBCSO. A middle one we'll be moving on to in a second, but linked below is a page of convenient specifications, comparison charts, but also some promo prices for the original BBCSO Pro and this new middle tier. So it's my great honour to be joined today by the powers of Google Hangouts to co-founder Paul. How are you doing, mate?
Hi, I'm really good, thank you. I'm really good. My hair's getting longer and longer.
I've got a pair of clippers that are arriving tomorrow, and I'm going to do the deed. I might do it on camera. So the whole nub of this BBC Symphony Orchestra project, Paul, was the idea of a self-contained orchestra and all of the benefits that brings, from it being the world's first orchestra plugin, if you will, all the way to us people being able to collaborate and share.
The problem that we always have, and which we also had even when we were basically in studios directly opposite each other, was opening each other's sessions. Sometimes you would have to sit there, especially if you got into one of those situations where for some reason a certain patch in Kontakt had to find every single sample. You could be sat there for an hour just trying to open the session and then you work out that, oh, actually I've got that version of this, so I need to upgrade that, but I can't do that because I'm on a different operating system, and all of those millions of nightmares that happen whenever you try and send one thing to another composer or a copyist or an orchestrator. It's often a total nightmare. The idea that we could eliminate all of those issues was really quite intoxicating.
The reason we jumped on it with the BBC is kind of, what right do us, a pair of lads who had a pint in a pub in Soho, have to go, yes, no, this is going to be the universal thing that everyone should start with? Well, the BBC kind of helps that along. For us in this country, but for a lot of people around the world, it's a kind of cradle-to-grave relationship they have with the BBC. Absolutely,
yeah. I mean, when I was little, and obviously when we were both little, as we're very, very close in age, the choices, for when you sat down to watch the TV, and our American friends find this very hard to believe because in terms of channel numbers, quantity of channels, they've been so far ahead of us. But when you sat down to watch the TV, you basically had a choice of 2 channels. There was BBC One and ITV. And if you ever flicked onto BBC Two, it was this slightly odd man with a huge beard and a kind of brown woolly jumper pointing at a board behind him talking about quantum mechanics. So that was a definite no-no. So we've grown up with the BBC being a source of entertainment for us when we were kids, being a kind of trusted source of news. We grew up with the BBC as this kind of benevolent monolith, just kind of giving stuff.
Nicknamed Auntie.
Auntie, yeah. Nicknamed Auntie, because it was always there and you could always rely on Auntie to kind of deliver. The BBC is a kind of such a massive part of daily life in the UK, and also with the BBC World Service around the world. It's hugely influential. They're such a high quality dispenser of arts, and the orchestras. I mean, there actually is more than one BBC orchestra. They have different focuses, but the orchestras are incredible, and the symphony orchestra just astoundingly good players.
Now, we were absolutely adamant that the only way of doing this was to create a high-end professional toolkit of the very highest specification, and that has happened, and it's continuing to grow. And it's been hugely successful, Paul. But what was, I know that you really spec'd this one up and you went crazy, but what was your thinking behind it?
I wanted it to be very playable. I wanted it to sound amazing. It's not that long ago where to run an orchestra, you needed a rack of machines.
Yeah.
So I think at one point, 8-9 years ago, I had 13 separate machines in my studio, computers, all doing slightly different things, running different programs and different bits of the orchestra. So it was incredibly important to us that you could load the orchestra. I mean, there's no point making a single solution for the orchestra if it then you then need 4 PCs to run it. So it had to run on one machine, but it also had to be future-proof in terms of the way that you could set up the sound of it. And for us, that meant going all the way to Dolby Atmos compatibility, but also the ability to have the different sections playing, but to have all of the mics open at the same time. And that came from an idea that John Powell gave me. He was doing a brass session, and I was showing him some brass samples in the booth at Air Studios. He said, "Oh, did you set all the mics up when you recorded this?" And I said, "Well, the tree, yeah, and the outriggers and all," and he went, "And the string mics." And I was like, "No." And he went, "Eh." And so that sort of planted a little seed. And this was the first time that we had the opportunity to experiment with that. And that was to say, right, well, let's have all of the mics open all of the time and give the end user the opportunity, if they want to be able to incorporate those spill mics, we call them, into the whole orchestra. And we found that although the samples that you make without using spill mics sound great, sound incredible, there is something extra that you get by putting the spill mics in. It adds almost an extra kind of dimension to the sound. It's very difficult to explain, but you notice it when you switch them off.
Right.
So that was another element of of kind of trying to make this future-proof, in the sense that you could just load it up with a single mix, run your whole orchestra, do everything that you needed to do. It doesn't even need to be the whole orchestra. For example, we also recorded every section with a good stereo setup pointed right at the section. So you can actually center any of the sections of the orchestra as well.
Well, I mean, what's been fabulous is it's been really kind of embraced across the board. And we've had some great feedback from A-listers, Nitin Sawhney, Ben Valfish, were immediate kind of fans of the very kind of true orchestral sound. But there is a blocker, if we want to create this kind of universal entry point, this point where this one kind of language we can all speak, having something as big as that from a memory footprint point of view, but also as expensive as that, isn't going to be, it's not going to be a possibility for everyone. So naturally, we wanted to address those two blockers, didn't we? So we've created Discover. And do you want to take us through the concept behind that?
Sure. So the idea behind Discover was to take something that you could introduce people who don't know anything about orchestral music to the concept of the orchestra, the different sounds of the orchestra and what things can be used for, but also to make a fantastic educational tool. So it's designed to look like the, in fact, shall I show you?
Yeah, I've got it here as well.
Flick it up here. So here, as you can see, it's designed to look like the orchestra kind of seating chart we're all kind of familiar with from school. You might have had one up on the wall in your music class at school. But it's an image that most people are familiar with. And it shows you the layout of where everyone was sitting when we recorded it, but it also tells you a little bit about each group of instruments as you go around. And when you click on the part of the orchestra that you're looking at, you get a couple of sounds available down the bottom. Kind of covers pretty much everything you need to be able to make a very core kind of basic kind of orchestration or write a piece with the orchestra. And we've actually sketched up a few classical pieces from the classical repertoire. It's amazing how good it sounds.
Yeah.
It's very, very small.
It is very small. In fact, I was talking to our social media manager today, and she's dreading people saying, oh, you said megabytes, not gigabytes. But it is 200 megabytes. I mean, we couldn't believe it ourselves that we could get it down to that, Paul, eh?
No. And especially when I started working with it, I was playing a bit of, I think it was Tchaikovsky, and I kept looking at it going, is this definitely playing the right samples? And that's a kind of key thing, because it doesn't matter if you're a kind of an 8-year-old discovering an orchestra for the first time, or if you are death metaler experimenting with this different category of sounds that maybe you haven't come across before. If the sounds don't sound very good, then you might as well give up straight away, because it's very hard to be inspired and to create music with something that sounds rubbish. So that's the other factor that we needed to build into Discover. We wanted to make it tiny so that it could be downloaded through someone's phone internet connection, but equally we wanted it to still sound good.
And the other blocker we mentioned was price. So we're delighted to announce this is going to be $49 US, 49 British pounds, and 49 euros. However, Paul, we understand that in certain parts of the world, $49 is a heck of a lot of money. And we don't want it to be a blocker for anyone. I mean, in fact, we kind of struggled a little bit with our marketing department. You mentioned education a lot, and I was mentioning, people using laptops and all that kind of stuff. And they're going, we're not really sure who it's for. And it suddenly dawned on us that neither of us had said everybody.
Yeah.
We talked about, should we make it free for schools? Should we make it free for people from these certain areas or regions? And we realised there's people struggling in Los Angeles as well as there are people in kind of Peru or I know that we've got some users in Bangladesh who are big fans of the labs and stuff. So there is a little wrinkle, isn't there, Paul? And that is?
So if you can't afford the 49, then it is free. And all you need to do is you need to fill out an online form, a kind of survey, and then there will be a kind of delay between you completing the form and then the download appearing in your account, which is maybe a week, 2 weeks, something like that. So it is genuinely a truly accessible, universal starting point for everybody. There should be literally no barrier to entry for this. If you can afford it, then that's absolutely fantastic. And you can feel good about the fact that, a very, very significant chunk of what you are paying is going directly to the orchestras and music in the BBC. So
it's not going in the BBC pot, is it? It's actually going directly into...
No, it is going to supporting the orchestras. So, it's also a very worthwhile project. And it's, amazing for us to be able to support the BBC in this way.
But when we were talking to them about why we felt we should do this, we felt it was very much in the BBC's remit to be open to all. And, as I said somewhat morbidly, it'll be a deathbed moment. We'll go, we'll lie on the slab and go, we did that. Something to be proud of, and I think it's something the musicians are really behind as well, just making it totally accessible for everyone.
Absolutely. One of the BBC's main remits is to educate and inform. And the orchestras already do a huge amount of work, with at schools and in kind of educational outreach programs, taking music into the community. And so this is another extension of their work in that way.
But what makes this even more scintillating, and one of the reasons why we've been developing our own plugin for all of these years, is we wanted to offer a really revolutionary new, again, just going back to the nightmare that you and I have had over the years. I remember when you and I have collaborated on stuff, and we are founders of the same sample company, and we've had a nightmare exchanging files. And, what use BBC Discover if it's not compatible with BBC Pro? So, Paul, do you want to, I don't know if I'm being over the top here, do you want to explain the miracle of mode switching?
Okay, absolutely. So, you'll see that I'm in Discover mode here. And if I put the spiccatos up and then I switch to the Pro mode, you can see that spiccato is there. Now, you can also see that we've just got the 4 sounds here that we had in Discover. Let's say that I'm working with somebody It might be that it's my orchestrator who's doing some parts for me, or it might be that I'm a teacher and I'm teaching a student. But let's say that I do some work on this track and I load up the violas. Let's say that I've started working on the violas here. Now I've got all of these different playing styles, and there are some that don't appear in Discover. So legato is an obvious one. So what happens when we switch to Discover? Well, you'll notice that now we have more articulations here, more playing styles, but some of them have a tilde symbol in front of them, like this legato. And this is a simulated legato patch. So it plays monophonically like the main legato. It will give you a really good idea of what the version that was just playing in Pro sounds like. Now this goes across the board. So every single sound in Pro has a corresponding virtual articulation when you switch from Pro to Discover. Now let's say I'm the student and I'm playing around with this, and I say, instead of legato, I say, what about that col legno? I'm going to change this to a col legno part. And let's say that I'm a student, I don't have that, but I've heard the teacher talking about it. Or if I'm the orchestrator, I might say, yep, I'm on my laptop, I'm on an aeroplane, I know that this will sound good with col legno. Now, when that is opened back up on the composer's or the teacher's session, you'll see that it loads up col legno here. Absolutely revolutionary. You can pass sessions backwards and forwards between different machines that have different editions of the library. And any changes that you make in both sessions are reflected in the other version.
I've just done this Dance Macabre trailer music, and I've got that here. It's all in Discover, so you can see I've got the little chain thing on. So as I flip through, you can see I'm flipping through all the different instances of Discover. The team told us about this lovely little trick that basically, if you change just one instance back to Pro, and then right-click or control-click on the little arrow thing, switch all instances to Pro, and you can see it's all now loading up all of those versions in Pro.
Fantastic.
Which is just, I mean, Paul, I don't think you and I were ever convinced this was going to work, but it's an ingenious system. And some of the beta testers have pointed out some really useful things, like, for example, someone said, because you don't have cymbal swells in Discover, you need to come up with a solution for that, because basically what it's triggering is just a cymbal crash. So you get these cymbal crashes that happen like a bar or half a bar before the next section, if you know what I mean. So there's been all sorts of stuff that we've had to curate, and we look forward to possibly you finding some other little curios like this. So it's insane that this Discover 200 megabytes is also compatible with something that is over 600 gigabytes, but it's one hell of a leap from free or $49 to the price that BBC Pro is at. So for those of you who've been paying attention, you'll see that when Paul and I have been switching between Pro and Discover, there's a new middle tier called Core. Shall we have a little chat about that on your channel, Paul?
Yes, absolutely.
Excellent.
Why not?
So straight away, over on Paul's channel, linked below, is the next part of this sidebar with us discussing the 3 tiers of BBCSO, Pro, Core and Discover, and talking about the differences between those and what you're entitled to as a Pro customer. Thanks as always for watching. Do subscribe if you haven't done already. Ding that bell for notifications. Paul and I and the Spitfire team are going to be making loads of content. Jake and I have got some amazing templates out, not only for Pro, but for Discover and Core. And indeed, we've just done a vlog where we tried to blow up our machines with one of the mega templates. So as I said, ding that bell, and one of those much appreciated. See you next time.